cup that is already full cannot take in new tea. Neither can a mind that is filled with its own noise, judgments, and certainties absorbs wisdom. So the question is, what are you too full of to truly grow? In the world of Zen, there's a story so simple yet so transformative that it has traveled across centuries. A curious scholar once visited a Zen master, eager to learn the way. But instead of giving him the secrets, the master simply poured tea into a cup and kept pouring. The tea overflowed. The cup could hold no more. When the scholar objected, the master replied, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and assumptions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" This is not just a story, it's a mirror. Today, let us reflect on its deeper meaning and how emptying your mind may be the most powerful thing you can do to transform your life. There is a paradox that governs the mind of those who walk the path of wisdom. It is the realization that the more you believe you know, the less you are able to truly understand. Many people approach life like the scholar who visits the Zen master, eager, ambitious, and full of questions. But beneath those questions lies an even greater obstacle, the assumption that one already possesses the answers. This assumption is subtle, but powerful. It hides in the tone of our voice when we interrupt others. It hides in the way we defend our beliefs, even when they no longer serve us. It hides in the stories we repeat to ourselves about who we are, what we are capable of, and what the world is supposed to be. And like the overflowing cup of tea, this mental clutter spills over and stains our ability to truly grow. To grow, you must first become empty. Not in a way that leaves you hollow, but in a way that makes you available. Empty of the need to be right. Empty of the pride that comes with titles and opinions. Empty of the mental noise that constantly says, "I already know this." In Zen, we call this beginner's mind. A beginner does not assume. A beginner does not argue. A beginner listens, not just to words, but to silence. And it is in that silence that the greatest truths arise. When your mind is full of assumptions, you see only what confirms them. A person who believes others are unkind will notice only cruelty. One who expects failure will overlook every opportunity. The mind becomes a filter, not a window, and through this narrow filter, life becomes distorted. So the path of Zen is to widen the filter, or better yet, to dissolve it completely. You learn to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be, not as you fear them to be, but simply as they are. And to do that, your mind must become like still water, transparent, calm, and undisturbed. The scholar in the story could not receive the master's teaching because he did not come with space. He came with knowledge, yes, but knowledge is not wisdom. Knowledge fills, wisdom empties. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts. Wisdom is the surrender of ego. In your own life, you may notice moments where your growth is blocked not by what you lacked, but by what you cling to. You may read books, attend seminars, and collect techniques. But if you do not release the internal clutter, the fixed beliefs, the rigid expectations, all the wisdom in the world will simply pour over and spill away. To empty your mind is to become teachable, not just by teachers or books, but by life itself. Every moment becomes a lesson. Every breath becomes a reminder. The way the wind moves the trees teaches surrender. The way the river flows around the rock teaches adaptability. The way silence holds space between sounds teaches presence, but only if the mind is quiet enough to notice, and only if it is empty enough to receive. Let go of the idea that you must always have the answer. Let go of the fear that not knowing makes you less. In the beginner's mind, there is room for everything. In the expert's mind, there is room for very little. So the invitation is simple. Release the illusion of knowing and return to the vastness of not knowing. The mind, when agitated, becomes like muddy water. No matter how desperately you stare into it, clarity evades you. The reflection you seek is distorted, broken by ripples of thought, judgment, desire, and fear. And yet, when that same water is left untouched, when no stone is thrown, no stick stirs the surface, clarity returns on its own. The reflection becomes sharp, the chaos settles, the truth reveals itself without effort. In this way, the mind is not something to conquer, but something to understand. Not a wild animal to tame, but a mirror to polish through stillness. This is the essence of Zen, to stop grasping, to stop chasing, and simply allow the dust of life. But in the modern world, we are trained to do the opposite. When problems arise, we rush to fix. When discomfort surfaces, we reach to numb. When uncertainty appears, we scramble for answers. But have you noticed? The more you resist a thought, the louder it becomes. The more you run from discomfort, the more power it gains. In this way, the very act of struggling with the mind gives it momentum. Stillness is not the absence of thought, but the absence of resistance to thought. It is the space in which thoughts come and go like clouds, passing across an open sky. You don't chase them, you don't push them away, you simply observe. And in this observing, a deeper awareness arises, a presence that is not reactive but receptive. A still mind is not concerned with control. It does not need to label every experience, solve every mystery, or defend every opinion. It knows that not everything needs a response. Some things, like a storm, pass on their own, and some answers, like seeds, need time and silence to bloom. If you are always reacting, always speaking, always filling the silence with your noise, how will you hear the quiet truths that only whisper? How will you recognize the internal compass that guides you not through logic, but through feeling? This is why in the Shaolin tradition, as well as in Zen practice, silence is not seen as emptiness. It is seen as sacred, because in silence, the inner world finally has a voice. There is a reason why monks sit in meditation for hours staring at a blank wall. It is not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. When the external world stops pulling on your senses, the internal world comes into view. And often, what you find there is not chaos, but calm. Beneath the turbulence of daily thought lies a steady current, an awareness that has always been there, waiting for you to return to it. This still awareness does not get caught up in the storyline of the mind. It watches the storyline arise and dissolve like a dream. And when you sit in that awareness, the problems of life begin to lose their grip. You begin to see things not through the lens of fear or desire, but through clarity. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start seeing, "What is?" The mind, when stilled, reflects not only the outer world, but your true self. It reveals the motivations behind your actions, the source of your restlessness, the nature of your suffering. And in that reflection, transformation becomes possible. You cannot change what you cannot see. You cannot heal what you do not understand. But when the mirror is clear, even the deepest wounds become visible and therefore possible to tend to. So stillness is not a luxury. It is not something to be reserved for the retreat, the temple, or the weekend. It is a necessity. And it is available to you in every moment. In a breath, in a pause, in the decision to simply stop, be still, and look inward. You don't need to go far. You don't need to add anything. You only need to let the waves settle. Because once the water is still, what was hidden beneath it begins to appear. And that is when the journey deepens, not by force, but by quiet realization. There is an ancient teaching that says, a hand that holds on tightly cannot receive. The same is true for the mind and the heart. In the same way that a clenched fist cannot catch falling rain, a mind that is attached, whether to beliefs, expectations, fears, or memories, cannot grasp peace. Letting go is not weakness. It is not surrender in the way most people fear. Letting go is strength. It is the art of, and most importantly, it is the precondition for receiving anything new. Many people pray for transformation, for healing, for clarity, but very few are willing to release what they must in order to make space for it. They try to welcome new insights into a room already full of clutter, and then wonder why there is no peace. The world teaches us to accumulate, to gather possessions, information, relationships, even identities. From a young age, we are told to define ourselves. I am this, I am that. I believe this, I belong here, I must achieve that. But all these definitions become like furniture in the mind, heavy and unmovement. They define the shape of our reality. And yet, we rarely question them. We hold on out of familiarity, not out of truth. Even pain, when it becomes habitual, still safe. But pain that is familiar is still pain. A toxic relationship, an outdated belief, a fear that once protected you but now stifles your growth, these things can become anchors, pulling you down even as you try to rise. So the question arises, what are you still holding on to that no longer serves the version of you you're becoming? To let go does not mean to forget. It does not mean to erase the past or pretend things did not happen. Letting go is not denial. It is a conscious release. It is looking at something clearly without hatred or attachment and saying, you have served your purpose. I thank you. And now I release you. This may be a memory, a person, a version of yourself that you've outgrown. And though it may be painful at first, that pain is not destruction, it is purification. Just as fire refines gold by burning away the impurities, so too must the fire of awareness burn through what is false and no longer aligned. The result is not loss, the result is space. Space in your heart, space in your thoughts, space in your life to breathe more freely and to live more consciously. Observe nature. A tree lets go of its leaves, not because it has given up, but because it trusts the cycle. It knows that by releasing what is old, it invites what is new. The caterpillar lets go of its form in the cocoon, not because it knows what it will become, but because change is encoded in its very being. Letting go is not about having all the answers. It is about stepping into the unknown with faith. It is about loosening the grip of control and realizing that life is always trying to guide you, if only you would stop clinging and start listening. But to listen, you must be quiet. To be quiet, you must be still. And to be still, you must release the internal struggle that says, I must hold on. It is easy to say these words, harder to live them, because letting go often feels like death. The death of identity, the death of a plan, the death of certainty. But in truth, it is the beginning of life, the beginning of lightness, the beginning of movement. When your hands are empty, you are finally able to climb. When your mind is clear, you are finally able to see. When your heart is unburdened to a fullest, not because you need, but because you choose. There is no shame in holding on. At some point, everything you cling to was something that helped you survive. But now, survival is not enough. Now it is time to live selfless, to evolve, to move forward, not by force, but by flow. And flow begins the moment you stop trying to control the current. In the modern world, emptiness is feared. It is mistaken for loneliness, for absence, for something to avoid or fill as quickly as possible. The moment silence enters a room, people rush to speak. When nothing occupies their hands, they reach for their phones. When an uncomfortable pause arises in life, between jobs, between relationships, between goals, they become restless, as if something is wrong. But Zen teaches the opposite. In the Shaolin tradition, it is in these moments of still space, when there is no noise, no task, no identity to perform, that something powerful begins to awaken. Emptiness, you see, is not the absence of life, it is the pure potential for it. Just as a bowl can only hold nourishment because of its empty space, the human being can only receive wisdom, peace, or insight when it has emptied itself of what no longer belongs. The idea that being full is strength is one of the great illusions of modern conditioning. A mind full of opinions cannot listen. A heart full of resentment cannot love. A schedule full of distractions cannot create. And a life filled with the noise of doing cannot hear the whispers of being. We are surrounded by people who are constantly stimulated, endlessly occupied, and yet inwardly empty. The difference is subtle but critical. True emptiness is alive, it breathes, it listens, it holds space. False emptiness is frantic, it consumes, it avoids, it fears silence because in silence the truth becomes impossible to ignore. There is a teaching that says the usefulness of a room lies not in its walls, but in the empty space they enclose. You do not sit on the material of the chair. You sit in the space the chair makes possible. You do not find peace in the sound of music, but in the silent pauses between the notes. In the same way, your inner strength is not just in what you've built, but in what you've made room for. The one who can empty themselves of the need to constantly be someone or something gains the freedom to become anything. There is the power of emptiness. It is not nothingness. It is not knowingness. It is freedom from the known. It is the infinite canvas upon which life can paint new meaning, new growth, new expression. When you sit in meditation and release all striving, no goal, no future, no identity, you touch something deeper than the personality you show the world. You enter into direct relationship with the essence of being itself. This presence does not require words. It does not demand explanation. It simply is. And from that place, peace arises, not because you found answers, but because you stopped asking the wrong question. You stopped grasping. You stopped chasing. You allowed yourself to be empty. And in that emptiness, you met yourself. Not the self of past and future, but the eternal self that watches all things rise and fall. To embody this emptiness is to become like the sky, vast, open, untouched by the passing weather. Thoughts are clouds, emotions are storms, but the sky does not fight them. It does not hold on, it does not resist. It allows all things to pass through and remains untouched. When you learn to be like the sky, the drama of life no longer owns you. You experience it, yes, you feel it fully, but you are no longer consumed by it. You become the witness, the space. And in that witnessing, a different kind of power is born. Not the power to dominate, but the power to remain grounded, balanced, whole. So do not be afraid of emptiness. Do not rush to fill every silence or escape every stillness. Instead, return to it, trust it, allow it to deepen. For in that space, life does not disappear. It reveals itself. One of the greatest misunderstandings in the spiritual path is the idea that awakening happens once and then it is complete. But truth is not a one-time revelation. Clarity is not a final destination. Like dust settling on the surface of a mirror, the distractions of life accumulate slowly, invisibly, and without warning. That is why discipline matters more than inspiration. That is why the act of emptying the mind must not be seen as a one-time effort. Just as the monks sweep the temple floor every morning, not because it is always dirty, but because it is always exposed to the world. You too must sweep the floor of your inner world. Thoughts will come, attachments will form, the ego will return. That is not failure, that is life. But with daily practice, these things no longer control you, they become guests, not rulers. The modern mind resists repetition. It seeks novelty, it wants to be entertained. But the soul finds its strength in simplicity and rhythm. The breath is always there. The silence is always there. The practice does not need to be dramatic to be powerful. It can be as subtle as watching your breath for 5 quiet minutes before the sun rises. It can be as simple as pausing before you react, feeling the tension in your body and choosing to release it. These moments of intentional awareness are like drops of water carving stone. On the surface, nothing appears to change. But over time, they shape your entire being. When you commit to emptying the mind each day, you are not avoiding life, you are preparing for it. You are creating space between stimulus and response, space between emotion and reaction, and in that space, you reclaim your power. The world may still be chaotic, but you are no longer swept away by it. You carry your stillness with you. Like a warrior polishing their blade before battle, you respond not from fear, but from calm. You do not wait for the storm to come before you build the shelter. You build the shelter every day with your breath, your attention, your discipline. This practice does not need to be long. What matters is that it is sincere. 5 minutes of presence is worth more than an hour of distraction dressed up as meditation. And the more you show up for this practice, the more it begins to show up for you. You will notice it in the moments when anger rises and you pause instead of reacting. You will notice it when anxiety visits and you return to the breath instead of spiraling into thought. You will notice it in how you listen to others, not waiting to reply, but truly hearing. These are the signs that the emptying is working. Not because you have become empty in a hollow way, but because you have become available, open, steady, grounded in your center. And still the mind will resist. It will tell you that you're too busy, too tired, too restless. It will say that nothing is happening. But those are the very moments to sit, to breathe. Because the practice is not about what happens in the first minute or the tenth. It is about what happens over months and years. It is about who you become by choosing to return again and again to stillness, even when it is inconvenient. Especially when it is inconvenient. That is where the transformation occurs, not in the rare mountaintop moment, but in the discipline of ordinary mornings, quiet evenings, and intentional pauses in between. Make it your ritual, not out of obligation, but out of reverence. Wake up not just to the world outside you, but to the world within you. Sweep the temple, empty the cup, clear the mirror, not once, but daily. Because clarity is not something you own, it is something you maintain. And like all sacred things, it must be nurtured. In the end, the lesson of the overflowing teacup is not only about letting go of what fills you. It is about learning how to remain empty. With presence, with grace. We live in a world that urges us to acquire, to accumulate, to know. But the true strength of the practitioner, of the seeker, lies not in how much they carry. We learn only how to contain, but in how lightly they travel. A heart emptied of fear becomes the space for compassion, and a life emptied of constant noise begins to echo with deeper meaning. There is no final destination on this path, only deeper refinement. The sweeping of the temple floor, the stilling of the water, the releasing of the grasp. These are not moments. They are ways of living. If you take anything from this reflection, let it be this. The power you are searching for is not hiding in the next achievement, but in your next breath. It waits for you in silence. It meets you in stillness. As the Zen proverb reminds us, only when the mind is empty can it reflect the moon. So I invite you now not to act, not to strive, but to pause, just for a moment. Empty your thoughts, release your plans, let yourself simply be. See what remains. Thank you for walking this path of reflection with me today. May your mind be still, your heart be clear, and your life be rooted in presence. The practice begins not tomorrow, but now. Not by moving, but by sitting still and listening.